We talked about the usual guy stuff, such as our lives, women, how we were enjoying this trip so far, and laughing at inside jokes from way back in the day, all the while drinking beer and cooking canned tuna and leaves soup above a campfire. The conversation eventually turned to video games. At first, we talked about some of the games which were relevant at the time, such as Half Life, GTA 3, Diablo 2, before I eventually brought up Pharaohs Crypt. I didn't really know why I brought up the game. Perhaps I was hoping that someone else here had played the game and I could compare our experiences. Nobody else seemed to have even heard about the game before. That was except for one friend who, while not having played the game itself, read about it on a forum dedicated to obscure and rare games. I explained to him the game's mechanics and the variety of strange levels the game had, as well as the fact that the developer wasn't listed. "Oh yeah, about that," he interrupted me in order to give me more insight about the game's origins. I read on the forum that the game's developers were tied to some kind of cult and didn't want to be tracked down for whatever reason. A cult? That was quite strange and also creepy. Also, the few people in the thread who had experienced the game strongly recommend against playing the game. They urged those who were interested to not seek it out. Yeah, I wish I had heard that before I got the game myself. Although, to be honest, I probably wouldn't have listened and got the game anyway. As 9 PM slowly rolled around, we extinguished the campfire and went to sleep in the shack. But we all noted that it was quite strange that usual sounds of wildlife during the night seemed to not be present. Maybe this area just didn't have a lot of animals? Then again, why would it not have? Another theory was that the campfire might have scared them off, which seemed like the best possible explanation. With a slightly eerie feeling, I drifted off to sleep once again. That night I had another dream where I woke up on a medical table inside one of the rooms of the 6th floor. I already knew what was happening, whether I wanted to admit it or not at this point. The game had a hold on me and I didn't know what to do about it. The figure appeared in front of me once again. Its footsteps were heavy this time around, but it didn't speak to me at all. All the times that it spoke to me before were terrifying already, but it just slowly pacing around the room, not saying a word, induced a type of panic in me that I cannot even begin to describe. That's when I heard rusted metal scraping against the floor. The next thing I know, it was towering over me with a rusted exhibition instrument. I desperately wanted to move, to scream, to do anything at all, but I was completely paralyzed. It jabbed the instrument into my nose and I could slowly feel and hear it going right into my brain. Just as the pain was becoming too extreme, I woke up yet again covered in sweat. I checked around for my things before I heard the sound of my friends outside screaming. This sent me into a panicked frenzy and I quickly gathered as many necessities as possible and got dressed in order to investigate the strange sound and check if my friend was okay. I got out of the cabin and strong gusts of wind immediately blew over me. It seemed like it was very windy outside. I quickly ran in the direction of the sound, and as I approached it, I began to have a strong, splitting headache. It was strange, as I didn't have any alcohol the day prior, and I wasn't too tired either. But that didn't matter right now. What mattered was whether my friend was safe. The closer I got, the more watched I began to feel. The feeling from the day prior was no longer something I could ignore. Then I saw my friend, with blood leaking from his mouth and completely pale skin. He stood completely still and had his chest pierced by a spear, which was held by a dark, shadowy figure. I was absolutely losing it at this point. Then, I didn't know what to think at all. Then, the figure looked at me and simply said,
"Run."
It let out an inhuman scream. The paintings of eyes began to appear all around me, and the strong gust of wind now began to sound like a constant faint screeching. And you'd be goddamn right that I turned around as fast as possible and began to run like never before in my life. Maybe I should have gone ahead and warned the others, but that didn't cross my mind at the moment. At this point I just wanted to survive, and while some part of me knew what I was seeing probably wasn't real, my primal instincts took over me, and I knew that if I didn't run now, I'd be seriously fucked. I quickly ran towards the direction of the nearest trail, all the while more eyes began popping up between the several tall trees, and watching me trying to run for my life. I never once looked back, but somehow I just knew that the figure was hot on my trail. I had felt its presence somehow. When I got back onto the trail, I had remembered that our camp was to the left, meaning that the way out was on the right. So I began sprinting in that direction. My pace had considerably slowed down. The ground beneath me began to feel heavy, but I could also tell that the ice and the thing chasing me weren't about to be merciful or fair. The eyes were following me, tracking my every move, and the presence behind me was just getting closer the more I slowed down. So I wasn't keen on stopping at any point. I had so much adrenaline that the exhaustion I felt didn't slow me down at all. I was absolutely flabbergasted as to how any of this could be happening. I had no idea if I just well and truly went completely insane, or if this was actually real. After several hours, I had finally made it out of the forest, with the only breaks I ever took only serving to give me the bare minimum time I needed to drink water so I wouldn't die of dehydration or some kind of shock. My heart was still pounding, and for whatever reason I knew that I still wasn't completely safe. After an hour more of just walking at a faster pace, I finally made it back home. I shut the door closed so hard that my next door neighbor probably thought it was a gunshot. For a second I just lied down on the floor trying to catch my breath before going to the bathroom to drink about 2 liters of water at once. It was still well into the night, around 3 to 5 a.m. And while I wanted to get more sleep, I still felt too unsafe and too afraid to go back just yet. I took off the dirty clothes I had and just left them in the hallway. I got back into the room and my PC was turned on. The monitor was a black screen with the title of Pharaohs Crypt on it. At this point I had accepted that either the game was a cursed artifact made by a cult, or I had just well and truly lost my mind. I sat down, put my hands on my mouse and keyboard one more time, and braced myself to do what I now knew had to be done. The title screen also only had one option now, which was
Face your judgment.
I clicked the option and wasn't even taken into the oasis. Instead it seemed like I was placed into the 7th floor of the game. This level was a large maze consisting of large tunnels, similar to those you would see in a subway station. Everything was very grey, depressing, and I could almost just feel how cold they were looking at my screen. Carvings of snakes littered the walls, along with references to an entity named Apophis. Every once in a while, several smaller snakes would pass by me, even if they didn't seem interested. This was a place so impossibly far underground that any hope of making it back to the surface was completely shattered. I had also noticed that the faint sound of something large moving in the distance, which echoed through the large tunnels of the game, would every now and then again feel like they echoed in reality rather than from my speakers. The scarab amulet was seemingly stronger in this level, which seemed to be to compensate for the long and large tunnels of this area. I had cautiously wandered through the maze of tunnels looking for some clue that would put me on the right path towards the exit door, which I assumed would lead me to the final level of the game. A few of the tunnels had doors on the side which I could enter, and they would always contain a puzzle I had to solve, which would give me pieces of a map or interactions with NPCs which looked like trapped white spirits that would give me hints to guide me through the maze. The puzzles seemed like a mix of all puzzles from previous levels, with a peculiar focus on more snake imagery. There was even one where I had to guide a small snake through a maze of his own, where I would have to freeze traps in place or open doors within the light spell in order to help him get to the exit. Walking through one of the many tunnels, following my map, everything got strangely quiet. Then I heard it. A strong roar behind me scared the living daylights of me. I turned around to see a gigantic rotten snake. It was a terrifying and massive creature with pitch black holes for eyes, an all-consuming gaping jaw, and it seemed to be so large that it barely fit into the tunnels, despite how large they were already. I tried to run away from it, but this thing was simply faster than me and caught me. The death screen simply showed its jaw closing, and everything went pitch black before hitting me with the game over screen. I was down to 4 lives now. This entity was extremely dangerous. It killed me 3 more times before I was down to the last life. I really didn't want to know what would happen if I lost that final life. My hands were shaking, but I had to do this somehow. Employing every trick in the book, using the sonar spell, checking every last corner just in case, and collecting all the hints and map pieces along the way, I eventually found the exit door. It was at the end of another long tunnel. I made William sprint over to it, and just as I did so, I heard the loud roar behind me in real life. It sounded like my things were breaking in the living room, and I felt genuine fear as I quickly raced to the exit door before the giant snake could get me. As my character got through the door, I could hear an impossibly loud thud on the door to my room. Had I not immediately looked, I would have guessed a bomb exploded outside of it and sent my door flying right through the window, but in reality it was completely fine. The sound seemed to be just a figment of my imagination. There was no oasis here either. I was just transported to the final floor of the game. It was exactly like my dreams, a maze with hallways made from meat. I was feeling extremely tired and dizzy at this point, but I needed this to end. There were no enemies or puzzles in this level. It was simply a maze with ambient music. After around 3 minutes of just walking around aimlessly, I had found the sarcophagus room. It was by far the shortest level in the game, but at this point that just made me feel glad, since I probably wouldn't be able to beat another long level, and had only 1 life left anyway. When I approached the sarcophagus, a cutscene began to play. The figure had, this time, actually appeared in the game, but I kind of just accepted that it was there now. I didn't really care for anything anymore. I was just glad this game was finally going to end. Then it spoke to me, not through my speaker, but more like I was hallucinating its voice. Chris, I'm glad you are here, even if I needed to push you. Forgive me, and don't worry, it will all be over now. It paused for a while before resuming with, "Are you ready to face your judgment?" The screen cut to the sarcophagus. It slowly started to open. The same intense screeching noise that I heard in my dreams began to emit from my speakers. And just as I almost saw what was inside, the game froze. I could hear and see something shooting out from my computer with sparks around it. But next thing I know, I'm lying on my floor and it's 8 p.m. in the evening. It seems like I had blacked out. I checked my clock and was in disbelief that I was seemingly unconscious for nearly the entire day. I had several missing phone calls from my friends, Jessica, pretty much everyone you'd expect to be worried about me was worried about me. And I had missed calls and several texts from pretty much each and every one of them. Before I got to explaining everything to them, which I didn't know how I would do, I decided to check what was going on. My computer wasn't turned on for one, and when I turned it on, there was nothing weird about it, except for the fact that Pharaohs' Crypt seemingly completely disappeared, with no trace of it anywhere on my PC. Also, the disc that contained the game was now lying on the floor of my room and seemingly burnt. Not burnt as in something copied onto it, I mean it was actually lit on fire and turned into ash. It was no longer hot to the ground, to the touch, but it was obviously no longer functional. I decided I would send it to a scrapyard tomorrow and never touched it again. I decided to text Jessica first. Hey Jess, sorry, I'm okay, don't worry too much about me. I probably just drank too much yesterday or something. I'm back home, completely safe. I'm fine, just a bit tired. I didn't feel like calling her just yet. It was quite late after all. After that, I decided to repeat the process for pretty much everyone I know before deciding what I was going to do with the rest of my day and how I was going to fix my sleeping schedule. Also, it just dawned on me that my car was still near the entrance to those woods, so I would go back for it the next day. Also, my friend who died, well, he was seemingly completely fine since he texted me, asking if I was okay as well. I eventually decided to get some sleep in order to fix my sleeping schedule, and luckily I didn't have any nightmares. My life after this pretty much went back to normal after a few days. While I still had the occasional weird feeling every once in a while, after about 72 hours, it was like nothing had ever happened. However, I still needed to know more about the game. For months on end, all I would find was information that I already knew from threads I had already read on forums that I already visited. Sometimes I would find a new thread. One of them was even the thread my friend had mentioned when we were out camping. That was until one day I decided to search for burnt disc with a weird video game on it. While the results didn't yield anything at first, I eventually found a report of a person being found dead in front of their computer, which had seemingly also turned off before they found him. It was later determined that the cause of death was an epileptic seizure, despite his family stating he had no history or even any signs of epilepsy, and seemed to handle flashing lights just fine in the past. The thing that freaked me out, however, was that when they inspected his computer for evidence, they found a strange blank CD burnt to a crisp.